We like to think we live in a world that runs on rules, right? Nations are sovereign. Borders are supposed to be respected. And one country definitely isn't supposed to just arrest the leader of another one. But what happens when the most powerful nation on Earth decides those rules don't really apply to them? I mean, just think about that for a second. Is that even possible? It sounds like something out of an old pirate movie, not our modern world. It kind of breaks the whole system, doesn't it? And yet, it's actually happened. The United States didn't just criticize the leader of a sovereign nation. No, they indicted him on charges of narco-terrorism, basically saying he was a drug kingpin funding terror, and then put a multi-million-dollar bounty on his head. A move that sent shockwaves through the very foundations of international law. Okay, so we've got to ask, how did we get here? How can one country, a country that helped write the rules of international law, just decide to break them? Well, this wasn't some random act. It's actually the endgame of a deliberate, century-long strategy that put America in a position to be the one who calls the shots. To really get how America became the world's policeman, we first have to understand how it spent over 100 years trying to stay off the beat entirely. It all kicks off with a very famous doctrine. The whole strategy started with a simple trade-off. Back in 1823, President Monroe basically drew a line in the sand right down the Atlantic Ocean. He told Europe, look, you stay out of our backyard, the Americas, and we'll stay out of your messy affairs. Now, this wasn't weakness. It was the opening move in a very, very long chess game. So for the next 100 years, while all the big European empires were busy fighting each other over colonies and getting into endless wars, America was doing something completely different. It was watching, it was learning, it was building. It quietly studied global resources, figured out the weaknesses of its rivals, and just focused on getting its own house in order, building up its own massive economic and industrial strength. It was a century of very, very patient preparation. And boy, did that patience pay off. Because when the rest of the world basically set itself on fire, not once, but twice, with 2 world wars, America saw that that global crisis wasn't a threat. It was the ultimate opportunity. And this is where their 4-step playbook came into action. Step 1. America stayed out of the fighting at first and just became the factory for the Allies, selling them everything they needed. Step 2. It demanded payment, not in paper money, but in solid gold. By the end of World War II, the U.S. held most of the world's gold reserves, which leads directly to Step 3. At a big conference called Bretton Woods, America used that leverage to make the US dollar the new global standard. And finally, the masterstroke. With Europe totally destroyed, America became the world's banker, lending out billions and creating a new global system that depended entirely on them. Oh, and just in case all that economic power wasn't quite persuasive enough, the US ended the war by playing its ultimate trump card. Dropping the atomic bomb wasn't just about ending the war. It was a crystal-clear message to the entire planet. The old world order is gone. There's a new superpower in charge now. But here, this is where the strategy goes from smart to absolutely brilliant. Instead of building an old-school empire with colonies and armies like the Europeans, America built something way more powerful and way more sustainable, an empire of pure influence. I mean, the difference is just night and day. The old European empires were clunky and expensive. You needed huge armies, occupations. It was a mess. America's new model? So much smarter. It actually championed the idea of freedom and sovereignty to help tear down the old European empires, which created this power vacuum that it could fill, not with soldiers, but with dollars, culture, and influence. So here's how it worked in practice. First, America would help a country get its independence from, say, Britain or France. Then it would rush in with foreign aid, advisors, and big loans. So this new, free nation got the money and tech it desperately needed. But there were always strings attached. In return, it had to open its markets to American companies and, you guessed it, sell its valuable resources at a good price. It was a brand new kind of empire, where control came from a checkbook, not a battleship. So let's bring all of this into the modern day. Let's see how this entire 100-year playbook gets deployed against one country. And for that, we have the tragic case of Venezuela, a nation that went from being the richest in all of South America to one of the poorest on the entire planet. Venezuela's story is just a wild roller coaster. Finding oil made it fabulously wealthy, but that money never really trickled down to everyone. And that massive inequality is what brought a guy named Hugo Chavez to power. He promised to use the oil money for the people, and he did that by nationalizing the whole industry, which immediately put him on a collision course with the US. After a failed coup in 2002, he cracked down, became more of an autocrat, and set the stage for his successor, Nicolás Maduro, who basically watched the country completely implode.
And the end result of this total collapse? Well, it can be summed up in one absolutely staggering number: 90%.
That's the percentage of Venezuelans living in poverty today. 90%. In a country that is literally sitting on top of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. It is a tragedy on an almost unimaginable scale. So you have to ask, how on earth did this happen?
Well, it was a total perfect storm. Internally, the country was a house of cards, built entirely on oil. Decades of corruption rotted it from the inside out. Then, Chavez and Maduro pushed out all the skilled engineers and experts and replaced them with political loyalists, which crashed the oil industry. And then, the final piece. They turned to America's biggest rivals, China and Russia, for help. That combination of internal rot and cozying up to U.S. adversaries, it painted a giant target on Venezuela's back. And all of that brings us right back to where we started. Why did the U.S. feel like it had the right to just indict the leader of another country? Now we can see the whole picture. The official reason, the one they gave to the public, was about fighting drug trafficking. But the real strategic reasons, well, they go much, much deeper. And they connect right back to that 100-year playbook we've been talking about. You've really got three parts to the answer. First, America was not going to let a socialist state allied with its enemies thrive in its own backyard. The very sphere of influence it carved out with the Monroe Doctrine. Second, the thought of China or Russia getting their hands on the world's largest oil reserves, absolutely not going to happen. And third, and this is so important, Venezuela's own terrible mismanagement made it incredibly vulnerable. The U.S. didn't have to kick down the door. It just had to lean on a building that was already about to fall. So what's the real takeaway from all this? There are two big, kind of tough lessons here. First, for any country, having incredible natural wealth can actually be a curse if your government is a mess. And second, and this is the big one, for a superpower, international law isn't really a set of sacred rules. It's a toolbox. You use the tools when they help you, and you leave them in the box when they don't. The playbook of power is always more important than the rulebook of law. Which leaves us with one last really big question. If having tons of oil and natural resources doesn't keep you safe, then what actually makes a nation powerful and secure in today's world? Is it having a diverse economy, smart alliances, good, honest government? In a world still run by this superpower playbook, that's the puzzle every country is desperately trying to solve.